Holy cow, I'm going to discuss another death, but before I get into that, what, just a cow? I don't understand why this is going on because it seems like it's going on more with this term and this president who I refuse to mention than any other president. If you speak out against him and then you die, well then you deserve it because you don't like this so-called president. That is the most asinine thing I ever heard. And it seems like immediately after somebody dies, they go on this political crusade, literally and figuratively. So on my video yesterday, I didn't even mention this because I didn't want to, because let's be honest, it's irrelevant. So Dolly Parton, who 2 times turned down the Medal of Honor or some award, she turned it down with the former president, and she turned it down with the current president. So they're not bringing up about the fact that she turned it down with the former president, but the current president, she turned it down. So now automatically she hated Trump, so the Grim Reaper was after her because Trump is the greatest religious figure in the history. Give me a break. This is an asinine thing that's been going on for a while. I heard about it when Hogan died. And you know that Hogan was for the current president. That every time that this happens, they have to bring up the political shit side of it. When it has nothing to do with a certain death. It has nothing to do with it. But we have to bring it up every freaking time. And I'm getting tired of it. I'm getting tired of it that I don't even bring up their political stance anymore because of this. Rob Reiner, when he died, same thing happened. I don't even bring up their political stance because it's irrelevant. It's completely irrelevant. But every time I turn around, people have got to bring it up. It's like the elephant in the room that nobody notices. So they got to keep bringing it up. Dolly Parton was the least political figure of anybody famous that I ever knew or you ever heard, because she wasn't very political. She stayed out of that for most of her life. She did. That's the way she was. But nobody seems to remember that. They think that she automatically hated the current president. I don't like the current president myself with what he's doing, but I'm not going to discuss that because that's one of my goals for this year. I just wanted to bring that part of it up. And now, yes, it is time to move on from that and talk about, well, another death. So while I was preoccupied doing my video with Dolly Parton, there was another death that happened not long after that. Tim Curry. You know, Tim Curry, I always loved as an actor. I always thought that he was one of the most underrated actors of all time. Tim Curry could play literally any role. He was very adverse in that, and he was very, very good at doing these different types of roles, like Clue, being the absolute goofball, and the bellhop, and Home Alone 2. And then, of course, what we all associate with Tim Curry, being the original, the OG. Listen, I don't care how good people think the new Pennywise is. He's not going to touch the GOAT of Pennywise and Tim Curry. That's what I associate Tim Curry with, is Pennywise and the original It. He literally stole that movie. He really did. There's not much I can remember from that movie. The only thing I really remember is Tim Curry's terrifying presence of Pennywise the Clown. Whenever I think of that movie, I think of his acting he did in that movie. It was completely over the top, but man, he nailed Pennywise. And the current Pennywise is trying to copy what Curry did when it can't be done. I was always a big Tim Curry fan in his movies because he had one of those unique voices that don't come along too often. It was a very unique voice. It's like some of the voices, like Christopher Walken, voices like that are very distinct. That immediately that you've seen him on the screen, you knew who it was. And he was one of the most iconic voices, like Gilbert Gottfried. There's Tim Curry. There's a couple others that are slipping my mind right now, like Denzel Washington, and there's a couple others that have very distinctive voices. And immediately you saw them on movies. Morgan Freeman, not Denzel Washington, but Morgan Freeman. Denzel Washington does have a distinct voice, but not like Morgan Freeman's. So when I think of, I think of iconic voices, or very distinct voices, like Tim Curry, Morgan Freeman, Gilbert Gottfried. Those are some very distinct voices that immediately you saw them on the screen, you automatically knew. Now Tim Curry, unfortunately, he didn't act anymore. He hadn't acted since 2012. He had a major stroke. He ended up having brain surgery, which sadly the world pretty much lost the old Tim Curry because he didn't have the voice anymore and he didn't have the memory anymore. The last few years is the memory that people have of Curry, of how he was just not the same person that he was once before. But I tried not to watch some of his interviews he did in the last few years because they were just, I don't know, I have a hard time with that, even with Michael J. Fox. I have a hard time watching videos of people who have an unbelievable talents, like Muhammad Ali, Michael J. Fox, Tim Curry. I have a hard time trying to watch their interviews. Bobby Brain Heenan was another one. I have a hard time watching their interviews on how much they have deteriorated to what they once were before. So I tried not to watch any interviews with Tim Curry in the last few years because he was a shell of his former self and he was not the same person that he was before. So, I have a hard time with that, and I do get criticized from people because I want to remember them the way they were, not the way that they became. If that makes sense, just a cow. Okay, it does on a level. So, ironically, we lost Dolly Parton, Tim Curry in a 24-hour period. And both were of the same age, 80. That is one of those really weird coincidences that seem to happen. And that is a really weird coincidence. The Grim Reaper was a little bit busy in the last 24 hours picking these two. And that's really weird, really weird coincidence. And speaking of Home Alone 2, and especially the Home Alone 1, there's not a lot of members of the cast that is still alive. Catherine O'Hara, just here recently, this year, she ended up dying. So yeah, not a lot of members of the cast of Home Alone 1, and well, Tim Curry was in Home Alone 2, but that be as it may, you know what? Sorry for my rant earlier in the video, but I did want to mention that because I've noticed that been going on, and I don't like that. I don't like it. But you know what? On a final note, rest in peace to Tim Curry, and hope that God they don't make this politically based too. Me and Mom are saying that's all for now.
That's all for now.